At 3:30 in the morning, public transit drivers from the German city of Leipzig gathered together. Under the cover of darkness, they weren't meeting up to start a long day of driving nor to discuss logistics. No, they were there to strike. But this picket line looked a little different than a typical union's. As activist Nicholas Rother describes in Rupture magazine, the drivers were joined by roughly 20 Fridays for Future climate activists. Initially, those in the union were skeptical of the outsiders. Who were these young strangers rolling up on bikes to this picket line? But as Rother explains, with the help of listening, good conversation, food, and of course a big barrel fire, those climate activists started to connect with the striking union workers. Unfortunately, amidst the darkness of fossil fascism and climate chaos, not all of us have a bonfire to gather around. Or do we? Today we figure out how to take climate action from the personal all the way to the international. From recycling to flying less, all the way to joining the front lines of fossil fuel blockades, today we get off the couch and start working to stop climate chaos. And if you want to watch this video ad-free, as well as watch my next video a month early, consider becoming a Nebula member. Signing up for Nebula using my link literally is what helps this channel stay financially viable. And in the process, you get access to over 30 bonus and extended art-changing climate videos, like the full hour-long uncut interview with climate activist Rosewater that you can only watch on Nebula. You can also watch my next video on the environmental impacts of AI, alongside a speculative science fiction bonus video I made envisioning an eco-socialist future, and much, much more. Nebula is swimming in awesome documentaries and deeply informative videos, and signing up is super easy. And you can pay just $3 a month with my special link, and I get a cut of that money, which helps me make videos like this one. All you have to do is head to my link at go.nebula.tv/OCC, click on the big blue button, and boom, you now have access to a massive library of thoughtful, ad-free, Nebula exclusive media from over 200 creators you love. When we think of taking climate action, consumer side individual choices often come to mind.
Like replacing our light bulbs with energy efficient LEDs.
Turn off lights when you leave a room, and unplug electronics when they're not in use.
There's a storied history within the environmental movement of picking up trash to protect the planet or installing more efficient light bulbs. And study upon study has narrowed in on the most effective thing people can do in their daily lives to take climate action. Often at the top of these lists are flying less, living car-free, and eating a plant-based diet. In terms of personal choices and consumer choices, these are the ones that give you the most bang for your buck. But of course, they also require the most sacrifice. We live in a world soaked in fossil fuels. And as I explained in this video, the emotional, physical, and financial burdens of divorcing yourself from that world in the name of climate action are extremely draining. This is great for fossil fuel companies. Those companies, like Exxon, have a long history of pushing your focus away from the fact that they are producing and profiting off of all the fossil fuels and chemicals causing this crisis, and towards your own comparably minuscule emissions. Internal documents and damning investigative reports have revealed that the fossil fuel industry popularized everything from recycling to carbon footprints as a means to distract us from their massive pollution impact, as well as actively pushing us away from actions that could directly affect their bottom line. Because if the requirement for taking part in a pipeline protest is to have already deleted fossil fuels from your life, no one would show up. As author Naomi Klein puts it,
if you can't be an activist unless you have already somehow purged your whole life of fossil fuels, then you'll have a movement of 3 people, which is great for the fossil fuel companies. It's an incredibly effective way to repel activists, to make people afraid to participate because they don't want to be called a hypocrite.
So as we keep ourselves busy worrying about how much we drive or how little we recycle, primitive fossil capital, the fossil fuel companies, continues to lock in infrastructure and fixed capital that will exist for well over the next 50 years. An individual consumer's choice to drive less or buy better is like a drop of water in a vast ocean. The unfortunate reality is that production is more heavily swayed by those who own and control the factories and refineries. In other words, capitalists. And capitalists have only one North Star: profit. Voting with your dollar does little to move that profit needle, especially in a world addicted to fossil fuels. But Climate Action List suggests that voting with your dollar isn't our only option. We can also take a stand on climate change by voting another way, at the ballot box. Voting in elections usually reaches the top of many liberal climate action lists. In a survey of hundreds of the world's top climate scientists, 76% said that voting for representatives with strong climate agendas is one of the most effective actions individuals can take. Yet for the over 4 decades since the threat of climate change became publicly known, voting in supposed green champions has done relatively little. The American Democratic Party, for example, promotes its climate initiatives, but then opens up vast swaths of public land to fossil fuel extraction and continues to funnel money into oil and gas plants in an all-of-the-above strategy. Meanwhile, explicitly environmental organizations like the German Green Party get consumed by the forces of fossil capital, capitulating to an all-of-the-above approach to energy and greenlighting the destruction of hamlets like Lützerath to make way for massive brown coal extraction sites. In short, regardless of pledges, electoral politics are drenched in the money and influence of fossil capitalists. Don't get me wrong, electoral politics will be a crucial realm of struggle in the battle against fossil fascism and climate chaos. But often, voting is seen as the only tool to affect the political realm, when in reality it's one of many paths towards building a sustainable and just future. If we were to build a zero-carbon world that brings a good life to all right now, what would that actually entail? This is what we need to ask ourselves when approaching the question of climate action. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and leading scientists reveal that to keep the world from warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius, we need the immediate closure of all fossil fuel infrastructure, production, and extraction, while simultaneously expanding our renewable capacity greatly. This necessitates massive transformation to our economic system based on fossil fuels. A transformation that would send world-shaking financial shocks into every facet of our lives. A transformation that would challenge the very basis of capitalism. Considering this, individual consumer choices are nowhere near the level of potency or scale to affect that change. So to answer the question, what can I do about climate change? We need to escape the realm of consumer choices. Looking at your carbon footprint will not solve climate change, although you definitely shouldn't be traveling around in your private jet or yacht. Individualized and consumerized actions should be seen as the least you can do. Instead, we must broaden our horizons. Our individual choices only become stronger when we link them with others and use those actions to build towards a long-term goal. That goal is toppling fossil capitalism and building a renewable-based world. This requires a constant evaluation of our tactics to assure that we're on the right path. As Diana O'Dwyer from the eco-socialist publication Rupture argues, we should continually be asking ourselves, how does this or that action contribute towards a fundamental rupture with capitalism and an eco-socialist transformation of society? In short, your actions, whether individual or collective, should align with the broader goal of toppling capitalism and building a zero-carbon world. And to help with that continuous evaluation, one of the best things that you can do is join a group or an organization and show up with whatever skills you've cultivated over your lifetime. Being in community allows you to compound your power, explore theory, feel linked and less alone, and most importantly, do work that you probably wouldn't have been able to do alone. So what can you do to stop climate change? If you're yachting every day, flying hundreds of times a year, or rolling coal in your pickup truck, then yes, you'll need to end those practices of conspicuous emissions-intensive consumption. But most of us are stuck within the grinding gears of the cycle of fossil capital. Most of us, especially those in the imperial core, live in a world drenched in fossil fuels. To eschew all oil and gas-derived products from our lives is an extremely difficult task. Not only physically, but emotionally, as we beat ourselves up for needing to drive a car to work even though there is no alternative. Consumer-oriented individual actions should be seen as nice-to-haves, not essential. At best, they can shave off a few tons of carbon from your individual footprint while billionaires add thousands to theirs, and at worst, they distract, derail, and delay necessary collective political action. Because flying less, driving less, and eating a plant-based diet often lack broader strategic or political angles that address the root causes of climate change. So your climate action should try to strike at the root, at what the cycles of fossil capital causing the climate crisis hold dearest: profit. As Andreas Malm and Wynne Carton write in their book Overshoot, supply and demand may strut around the stage, but behind them, profit is pulling the strings and regulating the appearances of both. Luckily, there are so many ways to join the fight in disrupting fossil fuel profits, to take meaningful climate action. It all starts with a crucial first step. As I already mentioned, one of the first and most important things you can do right now is join a local group or movement. It doesn't need to be perfectly aligned with your political tendencies, nor have all the answers to the climate crisis. The crucial part is that you're diving in with curiosity and pushing the cart down the road towards hitting capital where it hurts and building a beautiful, renewable world in its rubble.
Find organizations, find leftist organizations to join.
That's Rosewater, an organizer from the Sunrise Movement DC chapter. They go on to add a crucial caveat.
Understand that you can leave and you can go somewhere else. Figure out what reciprocity with that movement space looks like, because every relationship needs reciprocity. You need to be being taken care of by any movement that you join as much as you are putting in.
So it's key to keep in mind that joining a climate group or a leftist organizing space should be energizing and life-giving, not a long road to burnout. But once you do find your movement home, there's so many different kinds of collective actions you can take part in to force a transition away from fossil-fueled capitalism. Across the world, climate movements and leftist organizing groups have been remarkably successful at making sure the fossil fuel industry pays dearly for every inch of their extraction infrastructure through blockades and sabotage.
Weeks now, First Nations protesters have blockaded a road into the site.
All of this over shale gas and plans by a company called Swin Resources to use hydraulic fracturing or fracking to extract natural gas.
This is a network of direct climate action that Naomi Klein calls Blockadia. The goals of these direct actions are myriad, but altogether they gum up the engines of fossil capital, slowing down, if just for a moment, the insatiable growth of fossil fuel extraction. Indeed, in a study of 649 direct action campaigns blocking pipelines, mines, wells, and fossil fuel infrastructure in general, over a quarter of projects encountering social resistance have been canceled, suspended, or delayed. Those wins can only happen when we get up from the computer, join with other comrades, and actually face down fossil fuel infrastructure head on. As Rosewater so eloquently puts it,
the thing that we are fighting is not ignorance. It is apathy, and it is powerlessness.
However, the numerous direct attacks on the infrastructure of fossil capital is just one climate action tactic through which you can pressure the ruling class and capitalism into abolishing fossil fuels. There are other avenues for you to take climate action, which at first might not seem readily apparent in how they connect with the climate movement. One of them is the upcoming 2028 general strike. To understand it, let's go back in time. Let's rewind the clock all the way back to 1946. On December 2nd of that year, Oakland shut down. After the local retail union went on strike against two of the biggest employers in the area, Conn's and Hastings, over 100,000 workers across the city stopped their work in solidarity. Everyone from bus drivers to cooks walked off their jobs. Everything except pharmacies and food markets shut down. A general strike took Oakland by storm. In terms of scale, the strike was massively successful. Unfortunately, due to the corruption of the leader of the Teamsters Union, the strike quickly fell apart by the second day. However, the ramifications of that general strike still shape labor policy in the United States to this day. A year after those labor unions shut down Oakland, Congress passed a law that banned solidarity strikes, and it quickly became illegal for unions to strike outside the bounds of their contracts. The mass strike was dead. Ever since, there hasn't been a single general strike in the United States. But all is not lost. Today, the possibility of a general strike is surging forth again. Indeed, outside the US, one of the biggest general strikes in history shook India to its core as over 250 million workers and farmers struck, demanding direct cash transfers, pensions for all, an end to anti-farmer laws, and more. And the months of mass protests spearheaded by farmers that followed were successful.
Around India, farmers swarmed the streets in victory.
The state caved to some of the demands, including repealing the neoliberal anti-farmer bills that would have ruined the livelihoods of many Indian farmers. And now the rumblings of that general strike are echoing into the halls of US labor. In the fall of 2023, the president of the United Auto Workers called on all unions to line up their contracts to end on April 30th, 2028. Through that alignment, unions could bypass solidarity strike laws.
We want a general strike. We want everybody walking out, just like they do in other countries.
Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, had found a loophole to the ban on general strikes. The stage is now set for a coordinated general strike on May 1st, 2028. But how does this have to do with climate action? In short, any labor demand can also be a climate demand. As Rosewater explains,
a 20-hour work week, a 4-day work week, a 3-day work week, that's a Green New Deal policy because we produce the most emissions while we're at work. So if people work less, then we're producing less emissions.
Indeed, if we know that climate change is being fueled by capitalism's, and more specifically fossil capitalism's, insatiable appetite for fossil fuels to eke out and accumulate more profit from labor, then directly stealing away part of that chain is an essential tool. Strikes hit corporations where it hurts. They directly affect the ability of companies to turn a profit, and then force them to concede to the demands of labor. And a general strike supercharges that power. So this could be a crucial leverage point not just to push labor demands, but also climate demands. But it's not just unions that can pressure our economy to transition to a renewable future under general strikes. Students are a key ally in the struggle.
I think our under 18 organizers are the most key part because schools are very explicitly designed to reflect the workplace. They're practice workplaces. They were explicitly designed to reflect factories.
The Sunrise Movement is hoping to spearhead a mass student strike alongside that 2028 general strike. And in the process, showing solidarity, building organizing skills, and demanding climate action. Ultimately, the general strike of 2028, whether successful or not, can set a fire under us and allow us to make hard asks of ourselves and others. So if you're currently looking for a job, perhaps consider applying for positions in industries with strong unions that are critical to the flow of the economy. Then join the rank and file of the union and push for climate-oriented demands and agitate to align your contract to end on April 30th, 2028. This tactic of joining unions to agitate for radical change is known as entryism. At the end of the day, preparing for the general strike puts in sharp relief what we actually need to win. It forces us to build a climate movement that is focused on ending capitalism and building a world based on public ownership of production. Building deep ties between labor and climate camps will be crucial in the struggle to upend capitalism and build an anti-capitalist sustainable world. This is exactly why the climate activists from Fridays for Future took to the picket line in Leipzig, Germany. As Nicholas Rother writes in Rupture, what unions lacked, young activists had, and vice versa. Fridays for Future has a lot of young, super committed activists with extraordinary social media range and constant press coverage all over Germany, even in smaller towns. Workers usually don't have these skills or press coverage, but they have economic power. And this is exactly what the climate movement was lacking, but crucially needed. So showing up and supporting the struggle of working class people everywhere is a crucial step towards building a zero carbon world and power without capitalism. But if joining a union, climate group, direct action, or organizing for a strike is not your cup of tea, then tenant organizing could be. Tenant organizing, as Alison Escalante from Revolutionary Left Radio notes, is particularly powerful in that it builds explicitly political and anti-capitalist bonds between people from all different walks of life. It builds resilience and collective power in a hyper-local context.
Through tenants organizing, you have access to workers that you wouldn't get access to through union organizing. For example, the guy who lives down the block who drives for Uber and that's how he pays his rent, you're never going to get to him through a union, but you can get to him around tenancy and housing as an issue.
In addition to battling eviction, winning lowered rent, or infrastructure demands, an organized tenant union has the potential to demand decommodified, low-cost, low-carbon, and solar-equipped building as it places more and more pressure on landlords across the country and the world. At the end of the day, however, all of these actions and organizations need to be supported and situated in infrastructures of care. Neighborhood mutual aid, caregiving collectives, anti-capitalist community groups, and even climate grief discussion circles can act as our backbone as we beat against the walls of capital. Participating in building out this infrastructure is crucial. This can be how you take climate action. Collectives of care not only make strikes and protests possible by disseminating goods like food and services like childcare to those who need it outside the framework of capitalism, but they also strengthen the resilience of communities in times of crises. Crises that will only continue to mount as climate change worsens. As Rosewater explains,
if a hurricane hits your mountain town, if a wildfire happens where it's never occurred before, your neighborhood organizing, that is going to be the thing that keeps you most immediately safe.
So as we look towards the future, there are so many possibilities for climate action you can take beyond voting at the cash register or the ballot. Almost all begin with joining others in the struggle. Whether that's blocking pipeline construction, organizing a rent strike in your building, unionizing your workplace, or preparing your community for crisis, there are so many avenues to take climate action that don't require your wallet. Back in Leipzig, Germany, the climate activists from Fridays for Future and the local public transit union are celebrating a win. The strike was a success. They won a small bump in minimum wage, a reduction in the workday by 1 hour without loss of pay, and an extra day off. While not earth-shattering, these wins mean a better life for those in the union. But the young activists' solidarity with labor represents a broader win, a strengthening of the bonds between labor and climate organizers, bonds that will be necessary for toppling fossil-fueled capitalism. Ultimately, while toppling capitalism to stop climate change will require massive collective action from all of us, how each of us decides to participate is highly personal. Finding out what you like doing and what you're good at is the basis for being an effective comrade in the fight against fossil capital. To borrow from marine biologist and writer Ayanna Taylor-Johnson,
the first circle is, what are you good at? What are your areas of expertise? The second circle is, what is the work that needs doing? Are there particular climate and justice solutions that you're keen on? The third circle is, what brings you joy? Choose things that enliven you. The goal is to be at the heart of this Venn diagram for as many minutes of your life as you can.
The reality is that you are the only person who can decide what role you want to play in the movement and how you can stay involved and committed for the long haul. I can show you movements and effective paths that are starting to carve away at the rotten core of fossil-fueled capitalism, but only you can figure out how to best energize and plug into those movements. You might fail, but you also probably will win.
It's not black or white. Things will get worse, and we will build beautiful things. We will never know the full outcome until after we're gone. So if you feel sure that we've already lost, you're wrong, because you're alive.
Whether it's your skills with the camera, your vulnerability, your extroversion, your fearlessness, your art, your empathy, we need you. We need all of you to win a livable and beautiful world for everyone, everywhere. Rosewater and I talked about building that beautiful and livable future for over an hour, but for this video I could only pull a few sound bites from that conversation. If you want to watch that full unedited video interview right now, it's available exclusively on Nebula, because Nebula subscribers get access to over 30 exclusive Our Changing Climate bonus videos when they sign up. I love telling my viewers about Nebula because honestly, I think it's an amazing deal. I mean it when I say that Our Changing Climate would not be possible if Nebula and the people who subscribe to Nebula using my link didn't exist. When you sign up for Nebula, you not only support this channel, get access to over 30 exclusive Our Changing Climate videos, and get to watch my videos a month early, but you also get ad-free access to high-budget Nebula original plays, podcasts, and documentaries from over 200 creators, like Tom Nicholas, who produced a deeply insightful documentary on the questionable legacy of the baby boomers, or Neo's original video exploring the dense politics of fossil fuels in West Asia through the lens of the Kuwait oil fires during the Gulf War. Nebula is where I publish all my videos a month early and release exclusive bonus videos regularly, like the speculative fiction piece I made recently about an eco-socialist future, or this bonus video on taking effective climate action, or this one on the lies of carbon capture. So if you want to watch and support curated and meaningful content created by your favorite creators, Nebula is the place to be. On Nebula, I don't have to worry about view count or video restrictions, which means I get to lean into awesome creative projects I never would have made otherwise. In part, this is because Nebula is a creator-owned platform. It's built for the needs of you and me and not the demands of private equity or venture capitalists. And when you sign up for Nebula using my special link, not only do you get 40% off an annual subscription, but you're also directly supporting me because I get a cut anytime anyone signs up using my link. So join today, support this channel, and get 40% off an annual subscription, which is just $3 a month by going to my link at go.nebula.tv/OCC.